Welcome to Speaking in Spoons with your host, Christina Brookman.
Hi, this is Speaking in Spoons with your host, Christina Brookman, and the handsome co-host, Dr. Nate Strauss. And we have a very exciting special episode today about connective tissue disorders with our special guest, Jonathan Rodas. Thank you, Jonathan, for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Christina.
I've really enjoyed our conversations over the past couple months, and I'm just excited to have you here to share your journey um, through connective tissue disorders and advocacy and your exciting news for what you've started. So, Jonathan, could you share with our followers and viewers a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course, as Christina said, my name is Jonathan Rodas. Born in 1958. I say that because of my age, because 1966, 8 years later, I was diagnosed with Marfan syndrome, which is very rare to be diagnosed in 1966 of that type of a condition. But luckily, I was. Unfortunately, knowing that we had the condition, there wasn't much to know about it. So I just went on my merry way in my life, and I did all the things that you probably shouldn't be doing when you have Marfan's. You know, jumping out of airplanes, doing mountain biking, lifting heavy weights, weightlifting in the gym. As I proceeded in my life, I was always had some form of fatigue, some form of daily pain. I just shrugged it off and thought it's just growing pain when I was young. Then, of course, as I got older, I thought, well, who knows? Maybe I'm working too hard. You always have an excuse that you think is causing the issue, but little did I know that I had not just Marfan's and the symptomology of other things, but actually a condition which a lot of people know, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, a lot of the comorbidities of the condition I share. So as I went through life, I was always driven. And I think that part of my condition and dealing with things differently, that people like us who have connective tissue disorders affect our whole bodies, our whole life. We tend to just keep going and just deal with the problems and just assume, okay, well, I'm going to make through this time. I'm going to go forward. So I kept doing that. I kept pushing myself forward no matter how I felt until I was 31 years old and I had a major aortic dissection. And major meaning that the surgeon themselves thought I wasn't going to survive, and I did. And when that happened, my life changed drastically. I became far more fatigued, far more daily pain, but still, I did not want to give up my career, which at 31 years old, I had achieved a career, and I was basically an executive management consulting, very high up for a young man. So there's no way I was going to give that up. So I worked for another 11 years, and those 11 years were brutal, brutal. Like I can say, it's because I really did it because I wasn't going to give up my dream. And my dream of all things, one of the biggest dreams I wanted to make a lot of money, but not for all the bad reasons of just feeding my coffer and doing whatever I want. I really wanted to start a research foundation for multiple sclerosis because I lost my best friend, who was my brother-in-law, to it at a young age, and I saw him deteriorate, and that was my passion at the time. And as I went along for those 11 years, that's when I started realizing towards the 11th year, I'm going to wind up not surviving this if I don't stop. So basically, I had to stop. And I know a lot of you out here that hear that are disabled know how crucial and how difficult that decision is to make, because you don't want to give up on whatever you're doing, whether you're have a career like I did or you're a young person looking to go to school and make a life for yourself, it's very difficult to lose that ability. So, Christina, I don't want to go too. I could talk about a million things, but
No,
it was
I appreciate you saying that though, because I think that's something that so many people can relate to. And I know Nate and I are nodding. I'm getting a little teary because it is such a grieving process. I think there's a misunderstanding and a misperception that disabled people are lazy. And we're just waiting on that paycheck. And I mean,
right.
I can personally tell you out there really isn't that much of a check. But
No.
Even if there were, like, that aside, like, it's you're giving up something you have earned for yourself, something you're passionate about, something that
Yeah.
you identify. We identify so much with what we want to do sometimes, or the families we want to have, and it's very, very difficult decision.
Yeah.
So,
It really. I'm sorry, Christina. Go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, could you kind of, I guess, then explain how you handled that decision and then what you chose to do afterwards?
Yeah, absolutely. At the age of 41, when I decided to file for disability, like I said, it was the most difficult decision, and I did it. I realized, I have to do this. That there's no way around it. I can't go another year working full time because I could barely work 20 hours a week. So when I filed for disability, I realized how crappy the process was. And boy, I already was feeling depressed about being sick and losing my career. Then I had to deal with that. So being that I have the background in executive management, I'm a problem solver. That's what I'm best at. I'm at figuring things out. So I said, just I can figure this system out, and I'm going to create different statements and forms, and I did. And I, submitted all that information, and I was approved very quickly. Now, what could have helped me being approved quickly also wasn't just the forms and the ideas that I had, but also the fact that I was an executive person. Why would an executive person want to go to making, crappy money for Social Security? It doesn't make any sense. But like as Christina said, the money is not that good, and also, who really wants to be disabled and have SSI or Social Security Disability, SSDI or SSI? You don't want that. But yes, it's not a question of wanting; it's a question of having to, needing insurance, needing that support. So when I filed, I saw the process and I go, wow, this stinks. And I said to my wife, I want to help other people go through the process, and I don't want to charge them for it. So ever since 2001, I've been helping people get approved for disability, and also led to, and I do it all for everything I do, all my work is for free. I saw that when I did the first person I started to help, I realized this is more than just helping them with their disability. This is about their medical team. This is about the support they're having at home. This is about what the mentality is of their doctors, their own personal doctors, about the condition. So that's when I started getting further into medical advocacy, and that interwove into one, which was good because that's how it should be, is that we need better care. We need better understanding of the conditions, but talk is cheap. Action is what's important. And that's what I set out to do, was I want to make a difference, and I did. And Marfan's is where I started because I thought I had Marfan syndrome. I mean, I thought I just had Marfan syndrome. And it wasn't until like a year later I had my first Ehlers-Danlos person who contacted me, and that basically changed my world, because I thought Marfan's was difficult and challenging, but Ehlers-Danlos is 100 times more, and a lot less respect. So many factors. I could probably do a whole podcast just on the challenges of having Ehlers-Danlos and the complex comorbidities. And I always want to solve stuff. So this kind of turned into a snowball where I just continued and continued to try to make changes. And I did. I've been able to get a lot of people approved where the money goes to them, not to me. And also with the medical part of the situation is I helped them build a medical team because that's crucial also, is building a medical team around you. Because if you don't having good care, then it's hard, it's bad enough to be sick. Now, Christina, do you want me to get into where I am now, or what would
I
you
would
like?
love that. Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
I just always love hearing you talk because you're so passionate about many things that I think are so important, and it's
Thank
just wonderful. So thank you. Yeah. Let's fill them in on where you are now and this wonderful thing that you've started.
Yeah, since I have been doing this, sounds wild. This is so wild to me. 22 years of being a disability and medical advocate, which I said are interwoven. Along the way, I've been able to make a lot of changes and a lot of just for one person. I've actually initiated research. I've done a lot. A lot of people that know me know a lot of stuff that I've done. And I thought to myself, geez, I've been able to do all of these things, but I see things moving slowly out in the world, the organizations, the what gets done, the progress that's being made. So I decided, it's time for me. I see too much angst in the communities, in the especially the Ehlers-Danlos communities, and that's not how I work. I work that we all should be working together because there's so many areas that need to be fixed, and there's so many things that, and this is the real prime reason why I started it. I wanted to give the facts. What is accurate, what is not accurate. It's like, as I'll give you a huge example. Ehlers-Danlos hypermobility type is not rare. It is very common, extremely common. Having the message out that it is rare is very dangerous because most, and I've worked with a lot of doctors have told me, they hear rare, they walk away. They don't feel they need to know it. So all these years, people have been walking away. And that's hurt so many people's lives. I'm sure people listening to this has hurt their life. And also, in addition to that, is the diagnosis of the condition. We've been hearing for years that we have to get a diagnosis. We need to get the message out there. The thing is, if you're not diagnosed when you're young, that's extremely dangerous because that's where a lot of harm is done, is when you're children. So we really do need to get diagnosed when we are young. And I work with Ehlers-Danlos, Marfan syndrome, Lowe's-Dietz, and all the comorbidities, which, Christina, I know, there's a ton of them, unfortunately. And Marfan's and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome are very similar. They have multiple shared comorbidities. So in a nutshell, I wanted to make a difference. I wanted the message out there. Also, the fact that in 22 years, and I want to make sure I say this, I work with a lot of wonderful advocates that have the right plan on what they want to do with life, which is to help everybody, is to solve these issues, is to create research, is to get progress. And I guess that's probably the biggest word, progress. I hate talk. Actions speak louder than words. The greatest thing that ever was said. I wish I knew who came up with that, but that is absolutely true.
And so what would for those that are out there, and I just realized this, like there may be people listening that do not know what Marfan's and Ehlers-Danlos and Lowe's-Dietz are, and connective tissues in general. So I want to get more into the Connective Tissue Coalition, which you've started. But could you give just like, like a Cliff Notes version of...
breaking it down is I do this in my medical awareness work, which that's one thing I forgot to say. Because of my knowledge and my experience, I've been well trusted to come and speak at medical schools and hospitals. And also I started years ago a physicians awareness committee, which was very successful. And that's one of the reasons why I started the coalition, because I had a background in educating and getting all this stuff done. I was actually and I promise I'll get to the descriptions of each condition.
That's okay.
But I realized that a lot of the stuff I was doing as an advocate and the coalition, it's going to be just a larger platform of what I've done. And of course, I'm going to have this wonderful team to work together. Now, what's Marfan syndrome? Marfan syndrome is a fibrillin condition. It's a condition that affects the eyes, affects the heart, affects the musculoskeletal, the orthopedic issues. It's fibrillin based. Now, Ehlers-Danlos is collagen based. Ehlers-Danlos, of course, there's multiple types, like Christina said, hypermobility being the most common. But with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, the comorbidities are more vast. There's many, many more than Marfan does. Marfan's, you kind of have a roadmap of what to look for. Ehlers-Danlos, there's a sort of a roadmap, but it needs to be tweaked quite a bit, and things have to be put into it as far as new research and proving the points of different things. Now, Loeys-Dietz syndrome, very fascinating. Loeys-Dietz syndrome, of course, is named after Bart Loeys and Hal Dietz, who discovered the genes, and their team, because I always give credit for the team, not just the doctors named. They found a gene which they, of course, called Loeys-Dietz syndrome. And the thing about what Loeys-Dietz is, it was considered to be for years Marfan's, because doctors were wondering, why are Marfan patients having aneurysms outside of the aorta? And they said that there's got to be an explanation. And that's when they did the discovery, and they did all the research, and that's when they found the genes. It's not just one gene, it's multiple genes of Loeys-Dietz. Just like, and I'm going to make this very straightforward, there's not going to be one hypermobility EDS gene. There's going to be multiple ones, multiple, and probably even more than what Loeys-Dietz is. So I hope I gave a little bit of a track there, but there.
No, that's great. And I think something that that we've talked about, and that kind of goes in with this, that you talked about the Ehlers-Danlos and some of the others, is every case is different. Every person is different. Yeah. So every, just because, and I think that's what makes it so confusing and difficult for doctors. And this concept of the zebra thing, which we'll get into later, it's not just necessarily rarity, because it isn't rare, but it's expressed so vastly different in every patient. So yes. I think doctors in the community can get overwhelmed, but it's easy to break down, and a lot of it is too listening to your patients as well. Nate had brought up the zebra thing because it's on your site for the coalition. Could you talk about that a little bit and your thoughts on it?
Yeah, the zebra is an interesting, whoever came up with this, in medical school, they say, if you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. So not like a rare condition, think of the most common thing. With Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, doctors miss the mark because they don't know the symptomology. They don't know what's in front of them. They don't know that this is part of the condition. So with like hypermobility type, if somebody was, and I actually was in the hospital for a week recently, which is, we all know it's like an ongoing thing. You go to the hospital for various problems. The reason I mentioned is in the hospital, I answer questions, and they know that I'm willing to answer questions to medical students and other doctors and stuff. And in that time, they asked me about, geez, it's really difficult to diagnose hypermobility EDS. And I said, no, it's not. And they said, what do you mean? I says, well, if you have a patient that has issue with, let's say, Novocaine doesn't work for them, or it takes a long time, or they have a lot of different allergies, or their skin breaks out in different, rashes and lumps, and they have issues with when they stand up, their numbers change drastically. So I went through all the comorbidities, and they're like, wow, I do actually know some patients that have a symptomology of this. I better look into this. So it's not, you don't have to be a brain surgeon to figure this out. It's more of knowing the symptomology. And then I wish doctors, and I wish they would just put in the symptoms they see into the computer, and they're going to come up with, let's say with others, if they see those things like mast cell activation disorder is one thing, autonomic dysfunction could be dysautonomia, or POTS, which is one of the kids. These things are there, they're evident. You have to know what you're looking for. That's really what it comes down.
So with the Connective Tissue Coalition, what are your goals for the future of this organization?
Yeah, that's a
lofty question.
Yeah, it really is. Because when you set up an organization, and people who have done this will definitely identify with this, you want to do good, and you want to make an impact, and you want to be successful. The problem, though, is that you tend to run into multiple directions trying to get everything done. So you make a goal of 100 things. Well, not 100, that's exaggeration, like 20 things. for us, we decided research is one of our major issues that we need to address. How do you initiate research? Well, I've been doing that for years now. I know how to do that part of it, but as part of, but what I really needed to do was say, let's take this platform to a higher level. And by starting a coalition, research is the basis of the key of what we do, is because we want to stimulate research. As advocates, and not just myself, multiple others, have actually been able to stimulate research by basically bringing it to them, an idea, to the researchers, to the research fellows, versus waiting for grants. And I'm just sorry, but that's just not the way to go. Yes, you should get grants, but you need to initiate the flow of information. Most research fellows I talked to for the last 22 years didn't even know what Ehlers-Danlos was, or or thought they knew Marfan syndrome, and really didn't know. They only knew the basics. When I hear the things about, oh, Abraham Lincoln had Marfan's, or I hear, oh, Ehlers-Danlos, stretch your skin, it drives me nuts. It really drives me over the edge. Hopefully I was able to answer that. But well, no, there's more. I'm sorry. The coalition. So research is the key. Awareness and support. Now, you've all heard this over and over again on the internet of different organizations, awareness, support. It's just a word unless you actually provide an action. And our action is we can teach how to build a medical team. We can teach how to build a legislative team. We can show people how to do it. I don't want my organization to be something where, we're gonna hold 99% of the knowledge, and you're gonna have to just pry out little pieces of it. That's not what the coalition is gonna do. Coalition is open, which is the goal of the coalition, is open support, open awareness. The tools that you can use are going to be there. Plus, also, I have done what a lot of organizations have not done, which is I list other organizations. There are links. I don't want to compete with them. I want to work together. I want to work with everyone, because that's the problem. Everyone is so siloed or competitive. It's just not the way to go. And the other thing about the coalition that gives me a larger platform, along with my wonderful board and other team members, is the ability to set the record straight. Ehlers-Danlos isn't rare. Marfan syndrome, which people are going to freak out when they hear this, Marfan syndrome isn't rare. How do I say that? Because Marfan syndrome is considered 1 in 5,000, which is probably a scale number. But a lot of at least 30 to 40% of people who have Marfan syndrome were never diagnosed with it, because they don't meet the symptomology. They're not tall, or they're not thin. And makes me cringe when I think about how many people probably have died with aortic dissections who had Marfan's, but nobody ever knew they had it because they were looking for the 6'4" and thin type. And so that's about 30 to 40%. So if you knock that figure down, it's no longer going to be rare. So I guess the coalition is going to be like a think tank. There you go, Christine. I'm running in all these different directions, but everything I've said is true.
So the whole 20, 30, no, I'm just teasing you.
Yeah, but no, it has to be that way, because you have to, we're a baby and we were just born, and people need to understand that. It's going to take us time, but we definitely have initiatives we're working on, and we will advertise them or put them on the site when they're ready, because that's the thing. I don't want to talk about stuff or put something on my site that's grandiose and there's no action to it. I hate that. You want to see progress, and you want people to have a place where they can actually contact the coalition and ask questions and actually get true support, and not wait 4 weeks to 6 weeks to get a response or get action. That's never going to happen with the coalition.
Right. What are some of the issues, we've talked about, spoken to diagnosis and medical team and disability. Are there any other issues that you see a prevalence in these communities that you're very passionate about?
I love young minds, young medical minds. Very passionate that we need to see those minds more. There's a lot of medical education out there, and I'm not against them. Webinars, conferences, I get it. Especially when you have a condition, it really feels good to be able to see someone face to face that has the condition. There's a lot to that. But you want to go beyond that, and you want to have a platform where people can really hear what they need to hear about their condition and what can they do about it. You made a reference to, which is a great one, that not everyone's the same. You could have two sisters with a condition and have totally different expressions of the condition. It's wild. And I totally forgot what you asked me. I'm sorry, Christina.
No, that's okay. Well, I'll I was wondering what issues you're passionate within the community. Like, I know that you speak a lot about pain and the pain foundations.
Oh, yeah.
And also, we've spoken about some of the recent documentaries on Netflix about medical abuse or child abuse, like the allegations of child abuse within the community.
Yeah, those are excellent points, and thank you for steering my brain fog back into its spot.
That's okay, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I try really hard to not lose my patience in regards to certain topics, and one of them is being falsely accused of child abuse when you have a condition that's documented, such as, let's say, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, documented that you have mast cell, or you have POTS, or you have subluxations, dislocations. And then with the child, it's assumed that it's abuse because the child has fractured bone or bruising, swelling, et cetera, et cetera. And that's happened on and on and on. But nobody stood up and said, yes, Ehlers-Danlos can cause these things. So a child could be having these things because of the condition, not because the parents are abusing them. Does that, one person said to me, well, that would, if you say that and people think that, then someone's going to get away with child abuse for their child even if they have EDS. And I'm like, well, you don't throw everyone under the bus because of, let's say, one family. It's going to be such a small percentage. So that's another thing. I'm glad you brought that up, Christina, because I know personally.
Yeah.
Families have been torn apart because of false accusations. So,
and it destroys family. It's trauma for the child, for the family.
Yes.
And like you said, like, there are absolutely cases of child abuse out there, but I think the system is flawed in that, like, we've got the when these allegations the child is then held at the hospital. So it's almost like they're being imprisoned. They're taken away from their families. They're not allowed to contact their families. Their families can't contact them. And then the investigation that's done is usually done by like a doctor who is also a social worker, but they are either an employee of the hospital or they are a contractor from the hospital. And it's not like regular court cases or even other CPS cases where there is a genuine outside non-biased perspective. And then the judge is always going to side with the medical team because they have the medical information, but the medical team isn't contacting the doctors and the specialists that the child has previously been seeing. So the system is just so flawed. And
that's an excellent point, because that's happened over and over again.
Yeah.
Where they'll have a doctor, the family will have a doctor that's been seeing them for years, documented the issues that I mentioned, and they were just ignored.
Yes.
Oh no, our doctors know more. Well, no, your doctors don't, because if they did, they would understand these things are part of the symptomology of the condition. So what basically is the bigger picture of this is the ignorance level. So with falsely accused families of child abuse, like you said, it's not just like, oh, pull your child away, and I've stopped this. I've actually been able to be successful in stopping the hospitals from putting children into the psych ward. One example I'll give you is a mother called me late at night, very late at night, because I'm up late because of my habits, my condition. And she was basically in the ER with her daughter, and they had done certain standard tests, and she had been vomiting and passing out, and they were just running the link that this, assuming that it was psychological, because they couldn't find an answer. They didn't know an answer. So she heard of me and she contacted me, and I said, with your permission, I'll talk with them. And I said to the doctor, I said, look, she came in with vomiting and passing out, and there's certain other things in her heart rate. I said, this isn't a factor of psychological.
Yeah.
This is a physical factor, and she has in her record mast cell and dysautonomia, and those two things alone caused the things that brought her in here.
Yeah.
So she doesn't need to be in a psych ward. She needs to be getting fluids and getting proper support. Now here I am, a layperson, and I know this stuff because of all the years I've been doing this. What they
And
need
it's
to
also
do.
just because you don't know or you can't find the answer doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And there's this rush to label patients, a lot of patients with these disorders with psychological issues. And those do exist, but it doesn't mean the cause of the symptoms is psychological.
Right. Yeah, and the other thing that feeds into this, which is really parallel, is chronic pain.
Yes.
The opiate crisis. Every time I see progress, and we are making progress going forward, something comes along to push us back. And that was the opiate crisis. Because when they say the opiate crisis, the two words piss me off, because heroin has been a problem for multiple years. Addiction and overdose has been a problem for multiple years. But the fact that they don't understand, the medical community for the most part doesn't understand the difference, they think they do, of dependency versus addiction. I'm not addicted to my hydrocodone. I'm dependent on it because it's one of the only things that lowers my pain. And then pain itself is misunderstood, because when you go to a hospital, they go, which I hate, what's your pain level today? And I'll say, do you have a calculator? And they look at me and they go, what? Because right now my pain in my head is a 7. The pain in my feet are about a 6. My stomach pain is about an 8. My hand pain is, but I do it very nice. I never do it in a very, angry.
Would you average that at the end?
Was that
you're trying to average it, like
you try? That's why I said about the calculator. It's basically.
And you can't do points. Nobody allows you to do points.
Well, the scale is ridiculous. First of all, because
you have an objective scale. It's not really an objective measure of your pain. It's just a way for them to. It's not. It's sort of erroneous in a lot of ways.
It is, and one of the ways it is erroneous is the fact that it's not. You ever heard? You haven't really heard much of this. There's all different kinds of pain.
Yeah.
My pain is all the same. My pain in my head is a stabbing pain. Burning pain. There's multiple types of pain. But the other thing is, which is a further thing they need to connect, is what's causing the pain. It's not just one thing. And I work with a lot of doctors. I just want to make that clear. And a lot of doctors that through the years have become my friends because I respect them and they respect me. And they've taught me a lot of what they have to deal with on their end, dealing with their hospitals, about their training. And they say one of the biggest problems is when a doctor doesn't listen and isn't willing to learn or go that step forward to say, I don't know this. I need to find out more about this. But chronic pain, because this sweeps across mostly all conditions, the whole situation just got totally warped out. And it's sad because actually, as a consultant, I see how it was formed and when it started, and I know that some background details. They didn't have a pain specialist that had hundreds and hundreds of chronic pain conditions that was on the panel. It was mostly psychiatrists, psychologists, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, how do you do that? So we always seem to get burned. People make decisions, and Christine, I think this kind of leads into what you were saying. Jumping on and making a decision when you don't have all the facts, that's dangerous. The old saying, you don't assume anything, you make an ass out of you and me. That is so true.
Very true. And I love you spoke a story you talked to me when we've been speaking where you talked about I believe pain and symptomology of a patient because you're at a medical school and they brought up why do all these disorders have this component of, anxiety or depression, and they also do associate back with women too, which I'd like to get into later. But I
Yes.
love what
Oh, yeah.
but
Sorry.
what was, could you say what you said to them? Because I love that so much.
I was invited to a very, I'm not saying this because it's a very prestigious, well-named hospital, which I cannot name. And I was invited because the head of the department knew of my work and received information from me. I have these update emails I send out twice a week from a group. I didn't mention that, from a group I started in 2010, a support group, which, by the way, in my opinion, support groups are one of the number one resources for people to get information in there where they live and which doctors to see and which ones not to see. So I was invited to this department actually and when I was invited, they asked me, could you talk about Ehlers-Danlos? Could you talk about, and about not just me and how I'm dealing with it, but my advocacy work. So what happened was I knew the department that I was going to see that at least there was like 3 doctors in there that were very dismissive of EDS, and they were EDS women, basically saying this is mostly psychological, this is not physical, saying you need to see a psychiatrist. And I'm not saying with Ehlers-Danlos and other conditions, we don't have an anxiety component, but that's what leads to the story that Christina had me speaking of. So when I was doing my presentation, when I do presentation, I very much gear my talk to the audience, and I use like they call jewels, which are things that kind of break down, give you the answer without having to go through 1,000 things. Kind of make it, here's the fact, this is how it works. So what I did was, when I wanted to explain to them, because most doctors don't understand what we go through as a complex, people have complex conditions, was that I said to them, because one doctor asked me, with Ehlers-Danlos, I noticed all my patients have anxiety and depression. Can you talk about that? And I said, absolutely. I said, but can I ask you a question? And I'd like to ask everyone in the room a question. And I said that very loudly because it was a large room. And I basically stared down any doctor or anyone that was on their phone. So they would put their phone down. And then once I had everyone do that, that's when I said, if you had pain almost every moment of every day, sometimes so strong that you felt like you had a screwdriver stuck in the back of your neck, or somebody was taking a rake and raking your thighs or your hands. And then on top of that, you had to be very careful of what you ate or drank, because it can make you pass out, throw up, have all kinds of reactions within the body. And then I went on to, so basically what I was doing, I was going through the comorbidities, okay, that is specifically that Ehlers-Danlos has. And it's quite a long list. So I went through and I said, what about, having fatigue every day, sometimes so strong you could barely get out of bed to go to the bathroom. And that's what a lot of us do have. Or feel like having a cold where you're achy all over, Right. So I continued on and on and on. And then the room was laser focused. And at the end of that, I said, if you had all of those things, couldn't you have anxiety and depression? And the room nodded yes. That was the highlight for me, was them nodding yes, because you don't think sometimes. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of doctors I have as friends, but they even said that. They said, wow, I didn't even understand. I didn't really get that. And now I do, because if you were facing half that stuff, you would have anxiety and depression. Not saying everyone does. It's just that don't, an anxiety and depression is a factor, but tethered cord, Chiari malformation, these are all structural things. They have nothing to do with anxiety and depression. They can cause anxiety and depression, but anxiety and depression doesn't cause them.
Yeah.
But it can contribute. I do think that getting that sort of stuff addressed is not something it's not something to ignore. Yes, these illnesses would cause you to be depressed, but not addressing that depression, also a misstep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes. And that's a very good point, Nate, because how you address it. I tell people when they ask about what do I do, I say, talk to someone in the group, talk to someone that has a psychiatrist that they really like, that they can recommend. And it helps so much. I have a psychiatrist and they have been so helpful when I have things I want to bounce off. And no, absolutely. And there's nothing unhealthy about seeing a psychiatrist. It's a positive. I tell people all the time, you know, it's not a negative, it's a positive. It's part of what we're dealing with.
Yeah. And I think also, yes. And I think part of that treatment with the depression and the anxiety is having the validation and the being heard about your physical disorders, because particularly in this community, a lot of these disorders, patients are so often invalidated and said, it's in your head. It's not real. Or, you know, and that's why I was bringing up the psychological component, not because the psychological component doesn't need to be treated, but oftentimes its treatment is simply taking care of the physical, like feeling like you're being heard, you're being treated, you're not being condescended, you're not being demonized, and you're getting your support system within your family, your friends, your medical community. All of that helps treat those things.
Absolutely.
Too.
Right. Yeah, that matters a lot. It's like you just said about having them understand, those around you, especially family. Sometimes family and friends can be the most brutal of all of your issues because they just don't get it. And that's where I can work and say, there's certain people that are never going to get it. They're just lost cause. But there are things that you can show people. Like when I did early on, as I told my friends about how I feel. And I went into the fact that I feel like I have a cold or flu every day. They're like, wow, really? Like, yeah. Yeah. And I talked about my pain. So then when they heard the whole depth of everything, they realized, hey, wow, John's going through a lot, but I don't want sympathy. I want to be treated like I was treated before, you know, this got but yeah, it's really important.
Being understood.
Being understood.
Empathy, not sympathy.
Yeah. And there are some wonderful doctors out there. There are some amazing doctors out there. And it's not easy dealing with these conditions because they have a lot to them. I mean, I was in the hospital recently and one of the doctors said, you're a complex case. And I just started to laugh and go, you bet your ass I am. I'm absolutely a complex case. And it says that, but it's not by my design.
Yeah,
I was born with this body, you know. The question though is, you know, well, not a good question, but don't run away. Doctors and hospitals shouldn't run away or push us away. There are a ton of treatments for us. There's a lot that can be done for us. It's a matter of someone saying, hey, this can be treated, but we have to do it the right way. We have to organize how we're going to take care for these people and how to make this work within our system so we can actually make money. And believe me, hospitals, it's a business. I understand that, and that's how I think. But it's really important for them to realize they're part of the problem because they're not addressing the management of chronic conditions, complex conditions. And they can do it. They can. But they need the right people helping them do it. Hey, I'm in. I do that right here in Boston. So,
and it's in your best interest because we're lifelong patients. So, you know, it serves them too.
One thing. Sorry, hey, go ahead, Nate.
Well, I'm just saying it's not like what you were talking about with the management, you putting together a management team for people. It's just that should be something that people should just get. But because the system is not quite built to support someone like that, it doesn't I had to put together my own management team, and it's pretty eclectic.
And it really feels good, don't you, when you have a team that works?
Yes.
And my team is at one hospital, and I know that sounds crazy to some people. So I can't have a doctor at one hospital. I have multiple people that know my condition are all over the place. Well, the good news about having one hospital is you can provide them information if they're willing to listen. As long as the doctors willing to listen. And that's how I built my team. I started from scratch. None of these doctors had a connective tissue disorder patient, you know, and now they're they've learned so much, and they are seeing others. So yeah, it's really a matter of knowledge, and doing what I do best is solving problems. If there's a problem that can be solved, it's just a matter of don't run on misinformation. And that's another thing I totally forgot. Misinformation. We talked about, EDS not being rare. We talked about lots of, but there's a lot of other misinformation out there. Okay, about the conditions and about the treatment of the conditions, and the fact that there's no treatments, there are treatments for all these conditions. And the research, like I said earlier, needs to be ramped up, but it ramped up in the right way. We don't need peripheral research, and we don't need research. It's not going to provide what I call like opening a door. That's really, really essential, because it's 2023, and we know that our system is pretty flawed. The health system, the insurance system, it can be overwhelming. Overwhelming. But one thing the coalition is doing, though, and I know this sounds really grandiose, but we're making headway into improving the health system. But you have to realize it doesn't happen overnight. Right. Anything legislatively takes lava slow,
Yeah. Hard to turn a ship so big.
It is, but you do it by truly one step at a time. And then I never ever bring politics into my work or religion.
It's a bipartisan issue. Health being addressed. It's not a Republican Democrat thing. It's not. It doesn't matter what your stance is in politics. You can get sick.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and COVID being the horrible monster that it is.
Oh yeah, COVID didn't care who you voted for.
No, COVID didn't care, and also COVID did change a lot of the medical system. Doctors that didn't know autonomic dysfunction saw it in their patients or got it themselves. I know doctors that got COVID, and now they have autonomic issues, and they have strong fatigue. And I'm sorry that they do, but this has raised the bar of awareness. So it's no longer some hospitals, I won't name them, push people who had POTS away from the postural orthotic tachycardia, away from them, to now realize POTS is a real thing.
It's huge.
There's doctors that have it, and they've been talking about it. And some have said, I'm sorry, one apologized, I can't say his name. I'm sorry for all those years where I doubted. Now I realize I was wrong. And I thought that was wonderful, because how many people are willing to say they were wrong about something? I am one. If I'm wrong about something, I'll say it, but I'm not going to act like I know something when I don't. And that's a big thing, Nate and Christina, that's another bad thing, is not just doctors, but people who are advocates. If you talk about stuff you don't really know what you're talking about, or you don't have an answer, just say, I don't know. Let me see if I can find an answer.
It's hard.
That puts us in a dangerous territory, especially when the doctor does that, and they assume something, and they say, oh no, they act like they know something, but they don't know. That's very dangerous.
It's very dangerous, and it happens so much. I think the best doctors are the ones that are willing to step back and say, I don't know this, but I'm going to look into this, and I'm going to find the right person to help you, and I'll be there for you in the process, and then learn themselves, because medicine, science, we are always learning. Things are changing, I mean, we used to think the world was flat, and then we realized it wasn't. Like,
that was a while ago, and we still.
It was a very but
you better watch out. I think it's going back to thinking it's flat. Going
back to people.
But we're still, we're constantly evolving in what we know, and we need to be okay with that. We need to stop thinking we know everything right now, because we don't, and that's okay. It's frustrating for us as patients, but what's worse and more damaging is when there is arrogance and lack of flexibility and lack of accountability and wanting to continue to learn. We die when we stop learning. And that's what I love so much about what you're talking about with the coalition, because the research and everything, it's all about education too, and they have
to go hand in hand. And then you
Yeah.
got another element that I know the audience will of course know, is that it's 2023 and we are not any better when it comes to the treatment of women in the medical community. I see so much.
We're a little better.
Okay, I'll give you that, Nate. I'll say a little better. I'll go with
it's not great. We still tell women they're crazy. It's really awful.
Yeah, it's one thing. See, I didn't even know this as an advocate till a couple of years ago. I just assumed medical school you're trained from the male and female anatomy, and it has basically the same equal plan. And my medical context said that isn't true. They're still mostly working from the male anatomy, and that just boggles my mind because a lot of female symptomology is different, especially cardiovascularly, than men are. And that's
Yeah.
dangerous. That's really dangerous.
Yeah,
I've seen that
very
in 2020. I saw that I had a case the other day where she called me about her, because cardiovascular is one of the top areas of my knowledge and experience. And I said, that doesn't sound right, what she was being told. So I said, go see this other doctor. And he said, absolutely not. That doctor was wrong. This could endanger you. You know,
Yeah.
it's wild.
Right.
You got to
They
step
told
back.
my
and
mom
just-
things were psychological, and we have such heart history in our family and with the EDS and everything, and her veins are so small. And then and like all of her tests will come back normal. And I'll be like, okay, we need to push the doctor because every time you have a test, it's normal, but they're not the right tests. We haven't found the right test for my
Right.
mom yet. Because then they go in and they do an exploratory thing and they'll be like, oh my God, 70% of this major artery is blocked and we
Yes.
have to do a stent or something. And I'm like, I told you so. She told you so, but you didn't listen. You said it was psychological.
There's a lot of what you said is very important. And I want to add to this is the fact that our body temperatures are not the same as what I call normies, the normal population. I call them normies.
Yeah.
And ours is lower. My average body temperature is
Okay,
97.2.
I'm not crazy.
Yeah,
You're not crazy.
98.6 is not even between people that are 98.6, it fluctuates so much.
Yeah.
For us, we're mostly in the 97s, and when we have a temperature of 99.8, that's a temperature.
Yeah.
There's something happening here,
Yeah.
But someone see a 99.8 and say, "Oh, it's high, but it's not that high." It's not that high.
It's low grade. And I'm like,
low
no,
grade
because I don't get this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then when you mentioned about the blood results, that's really important. Very important what you said, because you really need to know the person's body. You can't treat everyone like we're the same flavor of ice cream, because we're not. And there's a lot of other factors going on that affect the things that they see. And I'm not, I know it's difficult. If I were in the doctor, I know it would be very difficult to evaluate.
But as much as we're different, as much as we're different flavors, we all are ice cream. Like, yes. I think that needs, like, that we all have, like, the problem is addressable no matter who you are, but you have to figure out what flavor you are.
That's right.
And trust in your own, in what you feel, because you do know your body better than anybody. You're with your body every day, all day long, all night since birth. So you know your body, and advocate for that, because the doctors are seeing lots of patients. They aren't having a lot of times. They may be operating on misinformation. And so you really have to advocate. I know my body, and this is not right. I'm so grateful for you being here today, John. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I want to say, because I'm sorry about today, as far as I'm not as on the ball because my brain fog was pretty high, and I was just out of the hospital I was in the hospital for a week. And I know a lot of you can identify with that, but with the coalition, I want to say it's now the word itself, coalition. I want to work with everyone. I don't want to just work with heads of organizations. I want to work with advocates. I want to work with people who are affected. This is everyone's coalition. I really mean that. And people get nervous when they say, well, I don't know how to talk to a doctor. I don't know if I could do talk in front of an audience. I said, don't worry. You can do things, you can learn how to do these things, or you can do things that you feel more comfortable doing. But everyone's opinion is important. Everyone's actions are important. And the coalition is going to be like a think tank and a place where you can get answers. Now, like we mentioned earlier, I will never act like, oh, we won't ever act like we know the answer when we don't. If someone says, you know, how common is this condition? I usually have a pretty grasp of it because I deal with tens of thousands. I deal with people all over the world, so I have a better understanding of. If you ask me, Jay, how common is pelvic prolapse and Ehlers-Danlos, or how common is an ENT issues or throat swallowing issues in these connective tissue conditions, I could tell you how common they were. But then there's other things I'm not sure of, and I just say I don't know. I don't know, you know, and that's important. But the last thing I want to say is we're not a dog and pony show. The coalition, meaning by that is we're not going to talk all these big things and talk about programs and initiatives without actually working on them and doing them and continually making progress. We're going to hit walls. It's going to take us time, but I just don't like what I see out there for the most part. There are some great organizations out there. I would be amiss if I started naming them. I don't want to name the names, but there are some great ones.
Yeah, don't name,
you know, but
names.
Yeah, but there's so many. But unfortunately, there's some bad players out there, and people hopefully will figure out who those bad players are. But they don't have our interests if they're not making things more affordable for us to do. They're not helping us find better care, and they're not just directing us to something that isn't working. We want answers, and we want support, and we really, you know, truly, we're not going to make a difference unless we have the ability to change these major things that I talked about. And research is one of the ones that we are doing, we have been doing. And I'm taking my platform from being an individual advocate to this level. And now I have this huge team of wonderful people that are working with me that I totally admire. And any medical doctor that's involved are doctors that I have a lot of respect for, that I know they're doing it for the benefit of the patient. And they have this true, you know, really strong support of what they're doing and caring about the patient, about their patients. I judge a doctor a lot of times by if a patient says they love them, I know they're a pretty good doctor. And a lot of times when I hear that about multiple times about a doctor, I'll know that, okay, this is a good one, not a bad apple. So hopefully I gave you a flavor of the coalition, but there's a lot more. I'm sure I'm forgetting.
We'll have you back. There's so much to talk about. Yeah. Do you have any questions or thoughts, Nate?
Well, I actually wanted to. Well, so Christina mentioned to me that you talked about your connective tissue disorders that you have and that also that you deal with. But Christina told me that you also deal with multiple sclerosis. So I wonder if you could talk for a second about that.
Yeah. With multiple sclerosis, I help people who have MS get approved a disability, but I also help them get local care. But my biggest, as I mentioned it earlier in the podcast, my brother-in-law, when I lost him, I just you know, I saw someone go from a strong, you know, man to a vegetable within 6 years. And I don't want you to think that I've given up on doing that research foundation, because there are some initiatives I can't talk about right now that actually have to do with that multiple sclerosis, because I just think that how do I do this in a very, I know it's not a political way, but without stepping on feet, things have come too slowly.
Okay. Yeah. If you feel uncomfortable talk, I was just curious. Like,
oh no,
mention it to me.
It has
that's what I had.
Like, oh, so. You do?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big piece of my heart. And that's where I said, when I started the coalition, I thought, how can I help people who have multiple sclerosis and other conditions like ataxia and others? It's through this type of support, because a lot of the support that we're offering, and I want to make that clear, it's not just for Ehlers-Danlos, Marfan's, Lowen's-Dietz, and the comorbidities. A lot of the initiatives we do are going to help people who live all throughout the country and have different conditions, you know, and one of them has to do with Social Security. One of them has, I should mention that the Social Security listings of impairment. You know, there was a wonderful NMA report that was done, I was involved with, and some great doctors and team. And that report is, we're trying to get that into the listing of impairments, which is Social Security's listing that has all the different conditions and the different severities. And if we make it into the listing with the pieces of this wonderful report, then it's going to make it easier for people to get approved. And that's not going to just affect all these conditions, but it's also going to open the door to another condition. Say, okay, well, what do we do with this one? How do we show the limitations? So there's a lot
incredible.
Yeah, there's quite a lot.
I know lots of people that's gonna help, because when we did my disability case, my advocate compared my condition to other conditions that were on that list, and then also, the acts of daily living and all of that stuff. But it was having to go back to that list because that's what they want to hear, especially when you're what they consider young and you have worked before.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
they're like,
And if
well,
you're
you're
young,
trainable, you can.
oh yeah, and if you're young and you look fine, so a lot of, if someone saw me, when I've done talks, well, that was when I did it in person, I would take the microphone, I'd walk around the stage, and I'd say, look at me. And people are like, what's this guy doing? I said, do I look disabled to you? No, people think disability is in a wheelchair or crutches. That's not what disability is.
Yeah.
The inability to work 40 hours a week for a year or more. If you can't do that, then you are disabled.
Yeah.
No matter what condition you have. But the last thing I want to say is that, the initiatives and the things that are on the drawing board are things that can help far more than just the conditions that are listed on the coalition. It's going to help people with various things. And one of them is an area that we're working in. We have a wonderful advocate that I work with, is to stop the 2-year wait period for Medicare, which is absurd that people have to wait 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a long wait period.
Yeah, and you could die by that time. You could just the amount of suffering. You could lose your home. That's called Stop the Wait. That's the name of the bill, and we didn't start it. We're just going to help get to its fruition.
That's incredible.
Because illness doesn't care about the timeline. Like it strikes, and then you need. Yeah.
And not everybody has family they can stay with or help them. So.
And they also some people come from families who are not very supportive.
Yes.
Or they just have no family.
Yeah.
And that leads us into we could do 3 podcasts on the health system support.
We would probably have to do 3 for our health system.
Talk about insurance companies. Yeah. It's sadly, but I don't want to sound like Mr. Wonderful here, but all those things are on my radar. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to have to run all these different things. I want to delegate. That's another thing that hurts organizations. You have to have the right people to delegate to, but you also give them the freedom to think and to work on these things and also work together. And I will be building a coalition team of, like I said, not just organizational people, advocates, and others. So,
Well, thank you, John. Thank you for being here today and listening or watching. We'll provide everything on our website so you can follow up with these different organizations, read more about John, and keep in touch. And John, we definitely want to have you come back, and I look forward to future conversations with you. And we're so grateful for having you today. Stay tuned, listeners. Up next, Nate and I are going to do our after party discussion. So thank you. Hey, welcome back. I am Christina Brookman, your host, with the handsome Dr. Nate Strout. And this is our after party, where we're going to talk about the interview you just saw with Jonathan Rodas about the Connective Tissue Coalition, and Marfane's, Ehlers-Danlos, and Loeys-Dietz disorders. So, Nate, what are your thoughts? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I thought the most interesting part of that podcast actually came when we shut the cameras off and talked about like the kind of corruption that exists in that part of the world. I thought that was interesting. Like, I don't want to name names either, but I think the corruption runs deep.
Yeah.
because there's so much money
to be made out of healthcare.
out of sick people, and
Yeah.
just that whole industry. It is an industry, and
Yeah.
it it thrives. Like, we are the bedrock of it's like, it wouldn't work if there were no more sick people, which
Right.
is funny because their industry is supposed to be healing. I think that was the irony that John pointed out, was that the irony of the industry is that its goal is to cure a disease, but if it does achieve its goal, its existence is there, it's thereby over. Like
Right.
its whole goal erases its purpose.
And well, I think that's applicable to a lot of different industries too. Like, and I think a lot of people can identify with that out
Uh,
there about, I mean, in
yeah,
America, we are very, I mean, that's kind of the way our commerce, our society, everything is set up. Um,
yeah. Well, yeah, because the military wants to end war, but it would be out of a job if there were no more wars. Pharma wants to cure, just like with the pandemic, they wanted to help, but at the same time, they would profit from there being another one, and that's it. It's sort of conflicting interests, right?
yeah. I
And that,
always love talking with John because he feels that he is very passionate about helping people.
right,
And
and selfless about it.
yeah, and that's sometimes hard to find. And I know a lot of people that I've spoken to, and like we've talked about this with, we can feel like we're not necessarily heard or seen, um and that, I don't know, have you felt this way, Nate? Like sometimes I feel like I've gotten so frustrated because, and I'm excited for what he's doing because I love that it's focused on research. I love that it's focused on education because I get so frustrated that where I live, there is such a lack of understanding of Ehlers-Danlos, which is what I have, and I know a lot of people feel that way out there. It's not just where I live, it's so many places, and it's
Right.
not just Ehlers-Danlos, it's so many disorders, and it's just, and I think some of my doctors just, what I get all the time is, well, you know, you need to go to somebody who knows, and they just kind of throw their hands up and they're like, you're complex, which I know John said, you're a very complex case. And I'm like, I know that, but when you break it down, it can be so simple too, you
Yeah.
know? Um, and all I need is doctors who care and who want to learn. And I have found some wonderful doctors. Um,
Me too.
but it's just it's it's it adds to the stress and the exhaustion that I already have from these disorders. Like I love how he broke down about like the mental health component. Like if you had all of these symptoms, wouldn't you be depressed? Wouldn't you have anxiety?
My
Like
dad
the way
said
he
the
breaks
same,
that down. Sorry, Nate, what?
my dad said the same thing, what, back when
Yeah,
he was alive. But he said to his sister, like, of course I'm depressed. Like, look at what's happening. Like,
yeah,
like, you would be crazy if you weren't depressed. That would
right.
be crazy. Like, if you were
That would
upbeat
be
about it,
crazy.
that would be weird.
Yeah. Well, that's the weird thing. Like, I'll get depression marked, like, for years, I would get depression marked in, like, by psychiatrists. And I was like, I don't meet the qualifications of depressed. Like, I have anxiety, I have stress, but I don't meet like the qualifications of depressed. I have recently, but a brief depression, not major depressive episode, which is what they want to put in. And I'm like, so if I am honest about my life and I speak about my life honestly, it's almost as if they project how they feel about, like, if I'm honest that my life is shitty, apparently that means I'm depressed. And I'm like, I'm not depressed. My life is shitty, but I want it to be better. And I wake up every day with the hope that it could be. And I try things to try to make it better. And that makes me not depressed, you know?
Well, but
And
the
it would be
same.
okay if I was depressed, but it's also like I can't get treated properly if you keep misdiagnosing me.
Well, but just it's the same because I've been on this emotional healing journey for like a couple of years now. Like that the problem I think at its core is that our first line of defense against these issues is to go straight to pharma, which
Yeah.
pharma is like heavy duty artillery. Like it's stuff that like the fact that we don't exhaust therapy, we don't exhaust like change like meditation or mindfulness or like any of
Yeah.
the other like things that we could use for someone who's depressed, like read Louise Hay or Wayne Dyer, or you know try to change do breath work, like just like there's also change your diet, change your lifestyle, get better sleep, like all these things that you could do as frontline treatments, but they all get the back burner because our medical system seems to want to do drugs first and then
Yeah.
the
And
rest.
not like, and then I do think
Not
there
that
is a
drugs
place
are bad.
for medicine. Like
Yeah, I
there
don't
are
think
some
drugs
people,
are bad.
yeah, some people genuinely need the medicine. And I also think medicine really only works in conjunction with what you're talking about. The breath
Well,
work, the therapies, the meditation, like the diet, like all of this stuff.
yeah, like say that you're hitting yourself in the hand with a hammer. You could take ibuprofen for that pain that's in your hand, but if you don't
Yeah.
ever stop hitting yourself with that hammer, it's not the drugs will not work. Ultimately,
Yeah.
they will not do their job.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
that's what you're talking about, right? Like because if
Yeah.
less you get to the core, and you can also use drugs as supplementation or as a conjunctive therapy, like it's not gonna change. You
Yeah,
know, it's gonna need
exactly.
more drugs. Say the
And
same thing about like
you
coffee
can't,
too.
and I love, and we started to talk about this. I think this is an episode for another day. And it's something John and I have talked a lot about. How, I mean, he talked about how like med schools really like learn from the male anatomy and the male perspective
Mm,
even today, and aren't really looking that much at the female. And our bodies are so different, and things are really made towards the male. And I see that a lot with my mom with, cardiovascular issues, how like they just haven't found the right test. Like every time they do tests for her, they're always fine, but then they have to go in, she's still having pain, she's still having issues, so they
right.
go in and do an exploratory, and she's like 70 to 90% blocked. And it's like, see, she wasn't lying, she wasn't making it up, I wasn't making it up. She's not crazy. It's not in her head. You just don't have the right test yet, you
Well,
know?
yeah. I mean, the irony of it is that using the male as the primary doesn't make a lot of sense from a developmental perspective because we all come into this world as a progenitive female, and then we diverged either male or more female. But
Yeah,
we know that's where we start. That's where
right.
everything starts is as a woman. You start in a woman. You start as a woman. It's just like it's
No,
all
that's
woman.
it. I never thought about that way. But well, even like, I mean, but that comes like all of the it's in your head. And we have an episode coming in December kind of about this. And a lot of patients are told it's in their head, even male, but it is predominantly female. And a lot of
Right?
disorders that are predominantly diagnosed as female, or, like Ehlers-Danlos, there are many men that have it, but because it's a collagen thing and estrogen, you know, makes, adds to the elasticity of the collagen, you see it more predominantly in women. And also migraines, more women, things like that.
Right.
Like,
No, and
they're not as well,
yeah.
they haven't been as well studied. Um, and and then there's more of a sense of saying, well, it's psychological, but like look back at the vibrator. the vibrator happened because doctors were treating housewives that were dealing with depression and anxiety, like, but they were also dealing with other stuff, but they were saying we will cure your disorders, and it was manual. They were using their hands at first, and then he got tendonitis and it turned into the vibrator. But
Right.
yeah.
Well, but you think we live in a modern medical era, but it was only like, I don't even, like 50 years ago, where we were putting women in mental asylums for the conditions that we're talking about today. And
Yeah.
and
Lobotomies.
they blamed autism on frigid. They called them cold, frigid housewives that were causing autism because they were too cold to their children.
Wow.
Like that was not that long ago. Like we think we're in the modern age, which I guess we are, relatively speaking, but we're not that far. We're decades from where we were.
Yeah.
It was the last century that
And
we
we
were.
have so far to go. So I'm
With,
I'm really excited about this coalition, because
yeah, yeah,
I think that I like that he wants to go slow. I'm just excited to see where it goes in the future. So
yeah. I mean, that's what's nice about the internet, is it's giving us a space where all these disparate people before were suffering in their loneliness, and now we can all kind of come together to change things. I mean,
yeah,
it's not gonna change overnight, and it's certainly not going to be easy because there's a lot of powers that like the status quo. Um, but
but there's power in numbers, right? And there's a lot of us.
the 10,000 monkeys. You get 10,000 monkeys, things start to happen. It's just like we need a certain threshold before
Yeah,
things start to change. But you can feel it change, because it's hurting so many people the way things are.
yeah,
And just, this can't go on forever, because it's not a winnable
no,
situation.
it's
But it's
not.
good.
Like he said, you can die waiting for disability. It's just,
Yeah. I mean, the sad thing is that I also want to emphasize that if you sit around waiting for things to change, you will probably die waiting. Like, I think the best advice I can give to our listening audience is to take the power back, take it into your own hands, do what you need to do for your wellness. And yeah, like, listen to your doctors, and work with a professional, but at the same time, you're the one that has to get on board. Like, so it's you who's guiding the ship. It's not your doctor. You have to take their advice, but you don't have to necessarily. Like, you're the one in charge. I think
yeah,
that's what I want to
be your
say.
advocate. I
Yeah,
think
be
that's great.
you're an advocate.
Yeah. And I think on that note, I think, yeah. Um, thanks, Nate. And thank you to Jonathan for being with us on this podcast. We look forward to having you back. And stay tuned, listeners and watchers. We've got lots of great things coming up for this season that we're really excited about, and we look forward to sharing with you. So thank you, and save your spoons.
If you want to contact us, please send a DM or email to speakinginspoons@gmail.com with any stories you have or would like to interview with us on any of our upcoming topics. And check out our website for all of our upcoming episodes and what's happening in the Speaking in Spoons community at www.speakinginspoons.com. Thank you for listening to Speaking in Spoons, and have a great day.